What's up, everyone? Sam here from ByteByByte.com, and today I want to talk about how to learn stuff faster and how to get better results with less effort. Alright, so the reason that I wanted to make this video and the reason that this is something that I think is so important to talk about is that all of the time I see people asking, how do I learn X? How do I learn Y? And the responses are always the same. They're just like practice more, practice more, practice more, practice more, practice more. And while practice is obviously important anytime you're wanting to learn something new, a lot of times what we tend to do is we tend to practice at the expense of actually doing anything in a logical or intelligent way. And so what we tend to do is we tend to grind. And this is where this idea of the LEET code grind comes from, right? The idea that we're going to prepare for our interviews just by doing more and more and more. And as long as we study enough, we're going to get results. And this is the best way to approach our interviews. And this really frustrates me because at the end of the day, yes, that will work eventually. Right? Yes, if you spend enough time and you grind for long enough, you'll start to recognize patterns and you'll start to see things that are consistent and that you can apply in your interviews. But it's not the most efficient way to prepare for your interviews, and I think that generally speaking, it's actually really bad advice. Because the problem with that is that it really relies on you just doing more and more of the same thing. And the idea is that if you're doing it enough, eventually you're going to get better. But a lot of times we tend to not actually know how to do things properly. And so if we're studying the wrong way and if we're learning the wrong things and we're doing things incorrectly, then we're spending all this time working really hard but not necessarily getting results. And so today in this video, I want to give you 3 specific strategies you can use to focus on, rather than just working more and working harder, working so that you can get the best results possible. And so I want to break this down and give you 3 different strategies you can use. And the first is this idea of the 80-20 principle, or Pareto principle. And so this is an idea that was popularized in the 4-hour work week, but is a general idea that says that 80% of the results for whatever you're doing are going to come from 20% of the work. And so what does that mean here? What that means is that 80% of the results from your studying are going to come from 20% of the studying that you actually do. And we can see this all over the place. This is basically a power law distribution. And what that means is that we want to really focus in our studying on what is the small percentage of most important things. And if we just focus on those, we can get a lot of the results without actually having to spend that much time at all. And let me give you a specific example of how this applies. So in your interview, there are a lot of different topics that you can cover. You can study strings and arrays, you can study graphs, trees, dynamic programming, et cetera, right? But the fact of the matter is, and we did some research earlier this year, and I'll link to one of the articles where we talk about this, we actually found that in all the interview questions out there, more than 80% of the questions, they were just 3 different topics. It was strings and arrays, trees and graphs, and recursion and dynamic programming. And that was it. More than 80% of all the questions that were asked fell into one of those 3 topics. And so what does that mean for you? Well, it means that if you just focus on those 3 topics, you're going to get the majority of the results that you would get from studying in general. So rather than spending your time equally weighted on every different topic, you're going to be much better off spending your primary time focusing on those 3 topic areas, because you're going to get the most results. And the same is true when you think about where you're spending your time in the process of practicing. So for example, I've found that when we're doing interview prep and when we're doing practice interviews, most of the time, the issue that people have is not with the actual coding part. So if you don't have a lot of coding background, yes, that is a part that you need to practice. But for most people, the problem and where they get stuck is actually with coming up with the solution itself. And so if you focus your interview attention and your prep on preparing and getting good at that problem-solving process, you can actually save yourself a lot of time, because if you think about the time breakdown of your interview, probably 50% of that time is spent just coding up the question. And if that part's easy, why are you doing it again and again and again as you're practicing? You'd be way better off saying, let me do more problems, but just focus on like understanding the problem and figuring out how to work through the problem. And so by using the 80-20 principle in this way, you can really apply it to anything, and it'll make it so that you can get so many more results so much faster than just grinding randomly. So that's number one. Strategy number two that you can use to learn things faster is immersion. And this is the idea that when you're trying to learn something, you want to totally immerse yourself in that thing. The perfect example being that if you want to learn a new language, you should go to the country where they speak that language, right? Because even if you don't know the language at all, even if you have no experience with this, you're going to pick up that language pretty fast if you get dropped into a different culture and you are dependent on being able to understand, right? And so immersion is super, super helpful because our brains are completely surrounded and there's nothing to fall back on. And the question then becomes, how do we apply immersion when we're preparing for interviews? And so one of the most useful things that you can do when you're preparing for your interviews is to actually practice the way that you are going to be having to solve these problems in your interview. And so what does that mean? Well, that means, for one, writing stuff on paper. I know that you're going to hate me when I say this because I know this is something that nobody wants to do, but the fact of the matter is that if you can't write code by hand, you're going to struggle in your interview, point blank. You also have to practice talking out loud as you go, because that's another thing where it's just really, really awkward. And so you want to be practicing this while you're practicing your interviews and while you're preparing, so that you're not going into your interview and this is like the first time you've ever done this, right? So it's so important that you simulate that experience as much as you can. Other things you can do are doing mock interviews, right? If you want to get like free mock interviews, Pramp is a great option for that. If you go to bytebybyte.com/Pramp, actually, you can get unlimited credits over at Pramp.com for doing peer-to-peer mock interviews. And so that's a great resource where you don't have to worry about like, oh, it's costing me like hundreds of dollars every time I'm doing a mock interview. Just go do a bunch of them. Put yourself in that environment where it's like uncomfortable, but get that practice. And all these things are like so valuable. One more strategy you can use, if you just videotape yourself doing a practice interview, it adds to the pressure and it makes it like uncomfortable, which is exactly what you want, because that's the experience that you're going to get when you are in an actual interview, and it's going to allow you to practice that. So technique one, use the 80-20 principle. Technique two, use immersion. And technique number three is to learn from someone who's done it before. And I know that this is something that, as software engineers, we tend to be really resistant to that. And like, I know because I was the same way, right? It's like we tend to be really resistant to the idea of asking for help or for, buying a course or going through, a coaching program, because we feel like we're supposed to be able to figure this out for ourselves. And it seems like that's what everyone else is doing. But the fact of the matter is that you're going to get such better results if you actually learn from someone who has done this before you. And that's because they know and can tell you what that 20% that you need to focus on actually is. Right? Like if you're going in and you're learning a new skill, you don't necessarily know what are the pitfalls, what are the issues, what are the, areas where other people screw up, or where are the places where I could go down the wrong path and waste all this time and then have to come back and relearn something. And by working with someone who's done it before, they can tell you. And so it's like, if you think about it in terms of like going through a maze, for example, it's the difference between randomly searching through the maze until you find the way out versus having someone say, I know where the end is, let me guide you out. And so I think that this is something that I want to really encourage you to think about, especially if you've been watching these videos, you understand, and you're here presumably because you understand that like this is an important thing, right? So it doesn't matter whether you buy my courses or buy someone else's courses or just go through free content, but I would encourage you to like look for a mentor, look for someone that you can learn from, because that's the thing that's really going to accelerate your progress more than anything else. And in an ideal world, look for someone who has done this multiple times over. Look for someone who either has experienced this multiple times themselves or has helped multiple other people. And like that's one of the things for me, it's like, I've worked with hundreds of students, and so I can tell you like when I'm sharing these strategies, that's based on working with hundreds and hundreds of other students. And so those are the three strategies that I want to encourage you to consider and apply all three of these strategies, because they're going to make it so that you can get the results that you're looking for so much faster than if you just do it blindly and if you just keep grinding and grinding. Having a plan and focusing on that 20% that's going to give you the most results, immersing yourself in what you need to do, and also learning from someone who has that experience and can guide you is going to get you the results in so much less time. And so I highly encourage you to try all those. If you enjoyed this video, please do click subscribe. You know, we're coming out with new videos every week, and I want to make sure that you're going to get those. Also, if you'd like to check out our free 50 interview questions guide, you can download that in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.